You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. This is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com, thechrisvossshow.com. Welcome to the big show, the circus tent in the sky of brainiums. I don't know what the hell that means. Brainiums of really smart people and really smart authors and all sorts of intelligence that you'll be delivered, that will pour down upon you like manna from heaven. And, of course, none of the intelligence comes from me. I'm just the damn host. But I'm Chris Voss. So, as always, before we get to our amazing guest that we have on the show today, I think you're going to be horribly entertained. What kind of verbs are you picking today, Chris? I think you're going to be wonderfully entertained at the guests that we have on the show today, and so I'll just build it up that way. But in the meantime, the plugs we must plug away, because that's what keeps the advertisers going and the plate spinning and whatever is going on with this microphone, electronics, and the interwebs. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. And LinkedIn, the big LinkedIn newsletter, all that crazy stuff we do on the social media channels that make it so you go, what the hell's going on over the Chris Voss Show? We should check in and see. He is the author of an amazing set of books, the Tom Clancy 0 Hour series, his own books, Matt Drake novels, and he has his newest book coming out April 15th, 2023. The book is called Forgotten War, and this is part of a Matt Drake novel series. Don Bentley is on the show with us today. He's going to be talking to us his amazing new book and some of the history and things that went into it and everything else. He is the New York Times best-selling author of Tom Clancy 0 Hour, Tom Clancy Target Acquired, and the Matt Drake series, Without Sanction, The Outside Man, and Hostile Intent. In 2023, he was named as a new author for the Mitch Rapp series, begun by the late Vince Flynn. Don is a former FBI special agent. I don't know what. I don't have a joke for that. He's a former FBI special agent. We had a couple on. We had Frank Flaguzzi on from the FBI, and who else do we have? We had the gentleman Peter Struck on the show. We also tried to get the recent head of the FBI on the show, but his people said no. So have you seen him lately? But it's the one gentleman who had the whole kerfuffle with Donald Trump. The big 6 foot tall guy, I forget his name, but I would have loved to have had him on the show for his book. Anyway, he is a former FBI special agent, a SWAT team member, or a former SWAT team member. Is that a SWAT team member or former SWAT team member?
Former SWAT team member.
Okay, well, you can probably still do it today. You take a couple doors and say, I don't know, is their lunch ready? And an Army Apache helicopter pilot. Welcome to the show, Don. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. But after that lead in, I keep looking around to see who the smart person is you're bringing into this interview, because it's not
you.
me.
It's you. It's you. My audience has been listening to my crap.
Wait a minute.
They're just like, please give us something new to listen to than whatever your shtick is. So, Don, give us your .com where people need to find you on the interwebs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really easy. You can go to my website at donbentley.books.com. It's BENTLEY books.com. And once you're over there, you can sign up for my newsletter. I post everything that I'm working on. I don't always know exactly what I'm going to be working on next, but I try and let my newsletter subscribers know as soon as I do. So that's a great place to find me.
There you go. So you've written a lot of different books. Let's talk about some of the different things you've written. I'm going to let you plug away here. Give me the different variations of what you've written with not only the Tom Clancy series, but also your books.
Sure, absolutely. So I am lucky enough I'm currently finishing the 8th book, which will be my 4th book in the Tom Clancy series. And I've had the same editor for all of those. He's a guy named Tom Colgan. He's fantastic. He's edited everybody from Janet Ivanovich to Lee Child. And he also worked with Tom Clancy. I apologize. There are a lot of Toms in this story. And when Tom Clancy passed away, Tom Colgan was entrusted with the Clancy estate. And so sometimes I get folks on Facebook that say, how dare you profit off Tom Clancy's name? And I assure you, I'm not the one profiting off of Clancy's name. I like to explain it. It's a lot like how George Lucas created Star Wars and then invited other writers to come on and build in his universe. I get to do that in Tom Clancy's universe. And so my first book was a book called Without Sanction, and my second book was The Outside Man. And when I finished The Outside Man, my editor, Tom Colgan, at the end of the editorial call, which is kind of like being in fourth grade and needing to face the teacher when you've forgotten your math homework at home. It's where your editor tells you all the things that he or she wants you to fix in the book. And so at the very end, in a very Columbo-esque like moment, he said, how would you also like to write the Tom Clancy books? And I kind of looked at him for a minute, and in my head, I was like, did he just say what I thought he said? And so I assured him I was very flattered and I needed to think about it. And so I went and told my wife, I'm like, you never believe what just happened. And I told her, and I was like, I'm going to tell him no. And she said, you're going to what? And I'm like, look, I got a full-time job. It's not at the point. And she's like, family meeting, kids get in here. And so they all came down and we talked about it, and we agreed as a family that I'd give it a try. And the reason why we had to agree that is to keep going with my series and the Tom Clancy series. I basically had to write a book every 5 months, and I've been on that plan for the last 2 years or so. And so the fourth book in my series, like you mentioned, is called Forgotten War, and that comes out on April 25th. And then the fourth book, and then I have 2 more Clancy books coming out. So I'll actually have 3 books coming out this year. And so at some point I would like a chance to sleep. Hopefully that'll be here pretty soon.
Yeah, I was a little confused when I pulled up your Amazon page, and I'm like, okay, so what's the book? You know, because sometimes I'll just take the author and I'll be like, okay, pull up this book on Amazon. And I pulled it up, and you've got your book that we're going to be talking about today, Forgotten War, Tom Clancy's 0 Hour book of the Matt Drake series. This is book 4 of your series. And I'm like, okay, well, that book's coming out. And then it's also got, you can also pre-order Tom Clancy Flashpoint and Tom Clancy Weapons Grade. And Flashpoint comes out in May, the end of May, which is a very short time from now. And then you got Weapons Grade in September. I'm like, wow. Yeah. I mean, your wife doesn't like seeing you much. Is that really what the problem is?
She just, as long as I make her coffee in the morning, she's happy. So if the coffee's ready, she can go without seeing me. That's kind of what the
and then she's off shopping with all that cash.
Exactly.
So you launched, I think, if I have this correctly, in 2020, the Matt Drake thriller series, Without Sanction. And that kind of took you down this whole road. Is that my understanding correctly?
Yeah, that's right. So I had the incredible fortune to debut in the middle of this little thing we called COVID. And so I got about a week and a half into my book tour. You know, I'd written 3 books before that and took 17 years to do it, because after you write a book and it doesn't sell, there has to be an appropriate period of time where you just sulk and are mad at the world. And so 17 years, 3 books. If you don't count that, I'm pretty much an overnight success. But I'm finally at the point that all authors love. I'm going out to meet readers and show my book, and the world shuts down. And so then I sit at my computer for the next 2 years trying to figure out why I wanted to be a writer in the first place. And so, yes, that is me. And I can also sell you lottery tickets if you want losing numbers after this. I'm a man for all of those things.
Well, you know, I got to tell you that the COVID crisis helped write so many books. I wrote mine, that I put off for 10, 12 years. There's so many great authors we have on the show that I'm like, what made you write this book? They're like, COVID. We're sitting around our house and we're like, well, might as well write some crap. So, you know, they wrote some amazing stuff, and we've had them on the show talking about it. So this is your, the Matt Drake novels. Talk to us about who this character is, and some of the pathway that he's gone to, and how this plays into the newest book, Forgotten War.
Yeah, absolutely. So my editor, the other Tom Colgan, he likes to say that when you are making your debut as a fiction writer, you have to do something that's the same but different. And so Brad Taylor is a good friend of mine. He's a New York Times bestselling author, was a Delta Force commando, and he writes a great series of books in this same genre that feature a character called Pike Logan. And so I'm never going to be able to write a better Brad Taylor book than Brad does, but I have to write something close enough so that if a reader picks my book up, he or she understands why it's shelved in the same section as Brad's. And so after writing, 3 books that didn't sell, I kind of sat back down and said, okay, what am I trying to do as a writer that can be the same but different? And so I made a couple of intentional choices. So the first is my protagonist is a guy named Matt Drake, and I write him in a first person point of view. So that's insider writer talk, just meaning that Matt is the one that tells the story. And the reason that I do that is that Nelson DeMille has been a huge influence on my writing. And so he's a fantastic writer, but he has this series that has a New York City cop named John Corey, and he writes it first person, and he's so funny. And I remember reading my first John Corey book, which was Plum Island, and I told my wife afterwards, I'm like, I would read about that guy going grocery shopping because he's so funny and that voice is so engaging. And while I'm not that funny in person, if you give me enough time and I can rewrite the joke 5 or 6 times, I can write in a similar manner. And that is something that's not usually seen in this genre. And I said, okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to write in a genre. I'm going to use that first person kind of witty, sarcastic voice. And that's what Matt Drake is. The second thing I did is when I looked across this genre, there are a lot of special forces guys, a lot of Navy SEALs, a lot of CIA operatives. But when I was in the FBI, I got to know a different organization called the DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency. So they have a very similar mission to the CIA, but it reports through the military chain of command. And most of the folks, or a lot of the folks who are in it, are actually military members. And so when I started researching this organization, the DIA and CIA fight over turf and mission and money, and there was just a lot of interesting conflict there. And so I took Matt Drake and made him what's called a case officer, which is a fancy word for a spy. And so his job is to run and recruit what in the intelligence community we call assets. When I was in the FBI, I had a similar job where my job was to run and recruit what we call sources. And so I took that and said, hey, that's something different as well. And then the third thing I did, when I was doing publicity for Without Sanction, I had a radio interviewer. She thought she was going to pin me to the wall. And she said, are you Matt Drake? And I said, I am absolutely not Matt Drake, but I've stood in the same room with men who could be. And so, being in the FBI, I got to meet some very interesting people. But more than that, in the years since, before I wrote full time, my job was to work for companies who made and marketed products specifically to customers in the special operation and intelligence communities. And so I got to know them and know how they saw their world and know, what they thought of things. And so Matt Drake is a former Army Ranger because 3 of my best friends are former Army Rangers. And that's why there are so many SEAL jokes in the book. I apologize ahead of time if you're a Navy SEAL. You will be offended. And so, I hadn't seen that done. And then the final thing is that a good friend of mine is a writer named Nick Petrie, and he said, in good books, in really good books, what the author is doing is wrestling with something of themselves in the pages of that book. And so in the 3 books I wrote that didn't sell, I was never really brave enough to get in and say, what keeps me up at night? What are the things that I'm wrestling in? And I was in Afghanistan, and in 2005, June 28th, 2005, I was the air mission commander for a quick reactionary force that was trying to rescue 4 SEALs, and we weren't successful. And the helicopter in front of me that I was trying to protect was shot down, and everybody on board was killed. And so that was that entire sequence was part of something called Operation Red Wings, which Marcus Luttrell wrote about in the book Lone Survivor. And, I had to wrestle with that and I'd spent my entire life training for that moment. It went sideways. I couldn't stop it. And how do I ever get that back? And so that I also gave to Matt Drake and made him wrestle with it in the form of, in Without Sanction, he has an asset that is killed and his family's murdered, and he thinks it's his fault. And so doing that kind of stuff, I think, helps lend veracity to the book, even though it's fiction and it resonates with readers. And Forgotten War is the same way. Forgotten War takes place during our 2021 withdrawal from Afghanistan. And while the book is certainly fiction, many of the events depicted in there were either real or were based on real events. And certainly the conversations between the characters and what they're feeling as they're watching their life's work, 20 years worth of blood, sweat, and tears crumble, is accurately reflected of those conversations. And so I hope that book can resonate with folks in the same way my others have.
There you go. And the book is billed as a book that will resonate with veterans. And then it seems like a lot of other people, according to my Facebook page, really love it as well that are civilians. And it sounds like a lot of your experience really is poured into the book, and the characters that have built the book and designing of it. It sounds like that's really important in how you've built out everything in the book.
It is, absolutely. And it's not, and just to be clear, I wanted to take more, what I tell folks all the time is my wife likes to say that I can't figure out what I want to do when I grow up, which is true. But I like to say kind of what I said before is that the thing I bring to writing isn't that I was a Delta Force commando like my friend Brad, but I got to meet the people who were. And so one of my best friends, who still serves as my subject matter expert for my books, was a Delta Force commando. And during his first operation, or his first deployment in Delta Force, was as part of Gothic Serpent, which we all know by the movie Black Hawk Down. And so he told me a story as part of that when those helicopters were shot down and the assaulters, the Delta Force and Ranger assaulters, were on the crash rescuing people, they knew that the guys inside were already dead. They knew that they were dead. And they were still getting their bodies out as they were under fire from bad guys. And so when you look at that, when you and I look at that, you think, what sense does that make? Like, why would you risk the living for the dead? But to them, it is a sacred oath that they will never leave a fallen comrade to fall into the hands of the enemy. And so they look at each other and swear, hey, I can't guarantee that you will come home alive, but by God, you will come home. And I saw that firsthand in Afghanistan when that operation went tragically wrong. The war, for all intents and purposes, stopped until we'd recovered every single one of our fallen comrades. And that's something that's unique to the U.S. military. I mean, we're still repatriating remains of folks from the Korean War or World War II. And that's not something that people who haven't had the pleasure of serving in the military know about. And so I thought, if I can provide a window into the men, and in some cases women, who could be real characters in the book, maybe that'll be another way to kind of set me apart from the lots of other amazing authors that do that. And so, I've been lucky enough to have many of those people for friends and customers, and you just buy them a beer and sit and listen as they tell stories. And so I try to honor a lot of them in my books. A lot of the characters are either based on them or the names are slightly changed. Now, the one thing I do to kind of stick the knife in and turn it is, if they're a Navy SEAL, I make them an Army Ranger. And if they're a Ranger, I make them a SEAL or a Green Beret. And so they get really angry at that. I think it's pretty funny, but that's the price for talking to a writer.
Oh, there you go. There you go. I when I was growing up as a Boy Scout, our scoutmaster was going through Navy SEAL, or not Navy SEAL training. I've seen that with another friend of mine, but he was going through Army Ranger training. He would talk to us about what they would do to get prepared, and then of course to get tested out for it. It was just extraordinary. I was just like, holy crap. And the amount of danger and work and stuff that goes into it is just, and I think it's good for a lot of people to be aware of the work that goes into it. The military, what we train with when it comes to leadership and the soldiers we build are great. And you mentioned before, the taking care of our wounded and our dead and making sure that they're honored correctly. You see that in the war with the Ukraine, with Russia, where, they just left the people on the battlefield. And unfortunately, they don't have a press that's, like our Fourth Estate, where, they can report on that stuff and go, hey, these guys aren't taking care of those folks. But that's the highest, one of the highest honors we can bestow is for their service and what they've done for this country and freedom. And I think that's what's great about your books, is you have that experience of being a veteran. You have it from several different facets, it sounds like, from the FBI experience and everything else, where you can pour this into book. Why did you choose the title Forgotten War?
Yeah, because I think if you look at Afghanistan, and it was a 20-year plus war, and I think what happened certainly after 9/11 there was a need to go make sure that the people, specifically Al Qaeda, who planned that attack and executed it, weren't in the position to do it again, right? Mm-hmm. But I think what happened, unfortunately, after that initial mission set was by and large completed, is that when Iraq kicked off, it pulled the focus away from Afghanistan. And so you had large period of times. In fact, I think it was Donald Rumsfeld who at one point said, in Iraq, we do what we must. So in Afghanistan, we do what we can. And so what happened is that, the majority of the resources, or a large part of the resources, went to Iraq and to tracking down people in Iraq. And so Afghanistan for a number of years became just a steady state place where you had, the generals in charge specifically, but even more importantly, the politicians, I don't think could articulate a accurate statement of why are we still there? What are we trying to accomplish? What is it here that is still worth risking America's sons and daughters for? And, I have my son was born shortly after September 11th, and he is now pursuing a commission in the Marine Corps. And as a father, I just found it abhorrent to think that my son 20 plus years later could potentially have to deploy to Afghanistan to do what? But at the same time, I think the way in which we withdrew from Afghanistan just crushed us. It crushed the people who served there. It crushed the families who lost, spouses and husbands and daughters and wives and stuff there. And to say, I think a lot of veterans would have been okay with us withdrawing or okay with it ending, but just not ending that way. And so, yeah. The thing that I was getting from that as I was watching is all these texts from friends and stuff who were saying, was it worth it? Was any of it worth it? And that is what went into writing Forgotten War. And the second part, the amazing aspect, one of the amazing aspects of the withdrawal was how much was done by civilians, by people who were former military or sometimes not, who just got on planes, went to Afghanistan and said, by God, as Americans, we told these people, we told these interpreters, we told these people who fought alongside us, if you stand up next to us, we'll take care of you. And our word still matters. And we're going to do that. And I think maybe not since Dunkirk in World War II, where the British people saved the British Army from extermination, has there been such an effort that was led in large part by civilians, the Pineapple Express, things like that. And so all of that went into Forgotten War, where I wanted to show what would my characters think. And not only that, and this book was the hardest one from the standpoint of I took a lot of actual events and then wove them into the narrative. And so I had to be really, really careful. And in some cases, I took some liberties to do that. But I wanted to show, not just tell a good story, but show the effect that was having on the psyche of Americans warriors. Because, the crazy thing about this Forgotten War for 20 years is that less than 0.25% of the American population served in Afghanistan. And so for 20 years, an all volunteer force of a fraction of the population bore our nation's wartime burdens, not just willingly, but most of them deployed either to Afghanistan and Iraq several times. And it's just crazy. Like I can't imagine another time in the history of human combat has that happened before. And all of that went into writing Forgotten War. There
you go. It's interesting that you can pour all this in there and at least pay it an homage, I suppose. Yeah. Is that an accurate description that it's an homage?
Absolutely.
Maybe not to the, how it ended, but to the men and women and the people who were there and fought and tried to make the best of it in spite of everything.
Absolutely. And you can see, Forgotten War is a little bit different. The other thing my editor, Tom, says is that what separates a great writer from a good writer is that a great writer pushes the envelope with every single book. He or she tries something different. Mark Graney is one of his writers as well. Mark Graney does the Gray Man series and just had the Gray Man movie come out. And Tom likes to say that Mark is at the point in his career where he could mail it in if he wanted to. He could write, here's another episode of The Gray Man, but he refuses to do that because he's such a great writer. And so when I sat down to write Forgotten War, there were a couple of things I wanted to do. Number one, I certainly wanted to have the homage that you talked to, like here are the men and women who serve on your behalf. maybe you don't know one. And so let me show you a little bit of what they look like, what the men and women look like and how they think. The second thing I wanted to do is my book is based on a friendship between Matt Drake and a guy who goes by his call sign Frodo. And so Matt Drake is a white boy who grew up outside of Salt Lake City on a ranch. Frodo is an African American outside of Philly who never went to college, and they're best friends. And that's emblematic of my time in the military, is that the military, maybe better than any other institution, serves as a melting pot where people from all backgrounds, all races, genders, creeds and stuff come together and form those unbreakable relationships. And the readers have really loved Matt and Frodo together. And I thought, wouldn't it be really neat to show one of their first operations together? And so part of Forgotten War shows something that happened 10 years earlier in an operation that went sideways with Matt and Frodo. And then part of it also shows, like, during the fall of Afghanistan, what was it like over there? What was it like as people were trying to go out and honor those blood oaths that they swore to their Afghan partners? And so that was part of the complexity of the book, certainly, and then hopefully the enjoyment the reader gets when they dig into it.
There you go. You mentioned Mark on the show. Mark, where to have it? Mark Greeny on the show. We had him actually on a few months ago for his recent book, and it was great to talk to him about his stuff. So we'll get a plug in there for him and a plug for the show we did. The other thing you mentioned, we also had Elliot Ackerman on the show. He's been on twice. He was on with the book with James Admiral
Stavridis. Yeah.
Stavridis. I knew I was going to mess that up if I tried swinging it. But yeah, Elliot's been on twice. And the second time he came on was for his book, The Fifth Act, America's End in Afghanistan. And at the time he came on, he was still actively making calls and trying to get people out of Afghanistan, the interpreters and different people. And, he was going through, he's like, I'm still going through it today. Making calls and taking calls and trying to get people out. And there's people that are, they're making private airplanes and flying in, trying to do stuff. And just extraordinary work and the care and love of the people that were there, and people stood behind us and trying to honor that promise that we gave to those people. And, I think even now we're still dealing with the fallout of it. I mentioned the green room we were talking before. We had Grand Illusion yesterday on the rise and fall of American ambition in the Middle East, and talking about how each administration came in with this, the last 40 years, with this whole, we have this mandate, we've been elected, we're gods of the world, we'll fix everything. And then, just continuing to have crisis after crisis in the Middle East. In the book, anything more you can tease out on, one of the things about novels is we can't give away the endings and much of the middle part. Anything you want to tease out more on the book that we should know?
Yeah, so one of the things that makes Forgotten War a little bit unique in my series is that it is also a bit of a mystery. So from the standpoint of when the book kicks off, Matt and Frodo are in a bar, and Frodo gets arrested by Army CID agents for murder. And it turns out the murder took place during that operation I referenced that occurred 10 years ago. And so as Matt starts to dig into that, what he realizes is that all of the men who were on that operation begin to die under mysterious circumstances. And so he has to go back to Afghanistan, because the only person who knows actually what happened in the room where the murder, quote unquote, murder took place, was their Afghan interpreter. And so you get to see that as well. And then, just like I said, I've tried to incorporate as many different stories as I could at the same time. And then what drive my books, I think, or make my books different, is the sense of heart that's there. And so my character, Matt, is married to a woman named Lila, who is half Afghan and half Pakistani. And so she has family that's in Kabul at the time that the Taliban is taking over. And so that's one of the things Matt's trying to do too. And I think, like, those relationships, the sense of heart between Matt and his wife, Matt and his friends, the service member that served together, again, that's something that I thought was most magical about my time in the military, that if you're not part of that brother and sisterhood, you don't ever really experience, I think, anywhere else. Combat is a crucible that's unlike any other. And when you come out of that, you're changed, and the relationships with the people that you went inside are changed with. After I had a mission that went south in Afghanistan, I remember flying the next day and trying to get a sense of who I was and whether I even still deserved to be flying and could do that job. And I was going down one way on a ring route, and my best friend, who was the troop commander, was coming the other way. And as we went, he just clicked on the radio and called over to me. And just the sound of his voice reminded me that I wasn't here alone, that if I got in trouble, there were people standing on that wall who would, by God, drop everything to come in and get me. And a lot of people talk about that. You talk about that in the civilian life. If I got your back, man, I got you. You get a beer or two in you and you got everybody's back, right? But then when you see it actually played out in real life, and those guys are people that are still on my speed dial now. And it's funny, one of my best friends that was the Army Ranger, when guys come to date his teenage daughter, he sits them down and says, I'm a nice guy, but I've got on my Rolodex a bunch of rough men who will come and do violence on my behalf. So just keep that in mind. In cheek, but it also isn't, from the standpoint, because once you've been through that crucible together, you're forever changed.
Yeah, there's a brotherhood to it. I remember one of my friends was a sniper in Iraq, and he was going back for his 4th tour of duty. And I was like, dude, you've gone through 3 tours of duty, and you want to go back, and you don't have to go back. And he goes, I want to go back. He goes, I'm really lost here. And we've had a few people on the show that have written books and talked about PTSD and some of the issues of dealing with the damage from the war, but also the lack of brotherhood that you have when you leave, and you're so used to that, And my friend told me, he says, Chris, when I'm there, everyone has my back. When I'm here, I'm alone. It's kind of like Rambo without the Hollywood hype. And he was like, when I go back there, I know people behind me. I have the brotherhood. I'm in family. Where here I'm not, even though I have a family. It's not the same. And the way he described it to me, I just went, oh, wow, I get it, man. But you're also putting your life on your line. But I mean, I think maybe it's a very manly protector provider sort of thing, where the honor and the protecting his brothers and stuff. And you don't have that now. People like you say will be like, I got your back, man. And you call them and you're like, hey, will you help me move some furniture? And they're like, wrong number.
No, absolutely. And I think one of the things I talk to veterans a lot and say, one of the things you don't realize when you're in the military is how much of who you are is tied up into what you do, that your sense of purpose, that who you are as an individual. And then while you might have some trauma from ongoing operations, from things that went wrong, just from, combat itself is corrosive, right? No matter what you do, everybody around you has the same thing, and there's a community there. And so what you don't realize is when you separate from the military, often you go back home or you go off back to do your job, you've now split yourself or divided yourself from the only people who really understand what you've been through, what you're going through now. And you find yourself alone and trying to wrestle with it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the veteran suicide rate is so heartbreakingly high, is because they go from this community of people where they're understood and you don't have to explain anything, because everybody knows, to a community of very well-meaning people who have no idea what you've been through or what you're going through. And so I think that's one of what I try and push folks to a lot, is to stay connected to their fellow veterans, to not let those relationships atrophy. Because when I got out, I was dealing with some of the repercussions for what happened in Afghanistan. And it wasn't until a good friend of mine now, Nate Self, who was an Army Ranger, and he was during the Battle of Anaconda, went in to go get Neil Roberts and Chapman's first name escapes me, but the two folks who had been left behind from a different Chinook, and his helicopter was shot down, and he lost a number of guys, and he wrote a book called 2 Wars about it. And he listened to me, and at the end of it, he just looked at me and he said, it's not your fault. What happened isn't your fault. And there was nothing that was magic in those words, But the fact that they came from somebody who had been there and done that and was dealing with the same thing, they meant a whole lot more to me than the same words that maybe my wife had said to me or other friends that didn't. And so there's power in your experiences and power in what you've done, and you need to be willing to share that with other veterans for sure.
There you go. There you go. We had Jason Kander on the show. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He ran for president a while back, but he talked about his crisis of PTSD, and he didn't think he had any because he didn't see any really what he thought in his mind rough things. But it's a big factor. We've had some other people on the show that have talked about different ways they're mentally trying to help veterans deal with PTSD, but the experience that you have and being able to pour them into a book and give veterans and other people an enlightenment and pay homage to their service, I think is astounding. Anything more you want to tease out on that book or any of the future books you have coming out, since you're putting out at least 3 this year?
So Forgotten War, April 25th. It is, like I said, it is has the most heart in any of the books. I think you get to see Matt and Frodo in some amazing different ways, and then also a reflection of Afghanistan and what happened there and the way that the men and women who served there view it. And so would love for you to pick that up and would love to hear about it from you. And then after that, a month later, I've got Forgotten War that comes out, or Flashpoint that comes out, and that's my next Tom Clancy book, and that one takes place in large part in the South China Sea, and then finally Weapons Grade comes out in September. I think I'm furiously finishing that now, and I have to turn it in a week, and that'll be out as well. And so you get 3 books from me. You can choose one of the 3. Hopefully you'll like at least one of them. So I kid with my friend all the time, where if you can't write a good book, you write a lot of books. And so hopefully one of those books will be a good book to somebody.
Well, you're being very modest. I think people love your work and enjoy it, and that's what keeps them coming back. So there you go. We'll be looking for a whole mess of books out of you in the future. Are you going to keep doing 3 a year or more a year or less a year? Or what's the plan?
What I know is that after I turn in this Clancy book, I'll start work on my first Mitch Rapp book, which comes out in 2024. Right. And what I told my editor, the long-suffering other Tom we've talked to, is that I'll check back with him in December. And so it might be that I get to write another Clancy book. It might be that I write another Matt Drake book. It might be that I write a standalone. But I intend to write something, but not all 3 at the same time. So again, my website, donbentleybooks.com, I try and let my subscribers know first what I'm thinking and what to expect next from me. So follow me there.
There you go. Well, Don, it's been wonderful having you on the show and brilliant discussion. And please come back for your future books. We'd love to have you and get plugs in for all that stuff and talk about what goes into them. I'm sure the audience will love it.
No, thank you so much, Chris. It's been great.
There you go. And thanks to my audience for tuning in. We couldn't do it without you. So refer it to your family, friends, and relatives. The Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you, but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law. Anyway, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. Goodreads. Wait, I did Goodreads. YouTube.com and LinkedIn. You know the drill. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Be good to each other. Stay safe, and we'll see you guys next time.